Hey there, Chem student, and welcome to the beginning of Unit 5. So, the first skill of Unit 5 is 5.1. It goes like this. I can calculate the mass of 1 mole of an element or compound. And if you check your list, notice that we're here at the top. So, we got a bunch of skills to get through. This is the first one of the unit. Let's toggle back to the whiteboard and let's get after it. All right, so to understand this skill, the first thing that we have to kind of refresh our memories on is this word called 1 mole, okay? So what does 1 mole refer to? Well, a mole is just a word that symbolizes a specific quantity of something, okay? And to kind of get the basis of this, I have a picture of a carton of eggs, and let's put this into kind of everyday terms, and then we'll take a look at the mole here in a second, okay? So we all know that a carton of eggs has 1 dozen eggs, okay? So by saying 1 dozen, what should pop into your head is that there are 12 eggs here in the carton, okay? So I told you number 12 without telling you the number 12. By saying 1 dozen, I meant to say the number 12. So if I want a couple of eggs, okay? Okay, so I could say a couple of eggs. What does a couple refer to? Well, you'd say, hey, you need 2 eggs, right? So a couple refers to 2 eggs, okay? So again, here's another example where I gave you a word. It symbolized a number. So now if we kind of change gears here, and I tell you that I want a mole of something, 1 mole symbolizes this number. And it should sound familiar from last unit, 6.02 times 10 to the 23, okay? And 6.02 times 10 to the 23 particles is specifically what a mole is referring to. Chemistry deals with the physical world, okay? And a particle is the smallest amount of matter we could describe, okay? And when I say calculate a mole of something, I want you to calculate the mass of this quantity of particles, okay? So that can be found in the form of an element or a compound, okay? And this right off the bat might seem like a really difficult thing to do. Like, wow, that's a ton of particles. How could I calculate the mass? Well, it's been made easy for us because if you have a periodic table, all you have to do is look at each element, okay? Look at the masses, and if I can calculate the total mass of a element or compound, what I will have is the mass of 1 mole of that substance, in other words, the quantity that we've just talked about. So here are the steps that we're going to take to calculate the mass of 1 mole of any substance, compound, or element, okay? And this would be a great time to pause the video to write these things down for yourself because you will definitely use this over and over again. So here goes. So rule number 1, or I'm sorry, step number 1, find the mass of each symbol on the periodic table. Step number 2, once we find the mass, okay, of all these symbols that we need for a specific example, we will multiply those masses by the subscripts, okay? So those are the little tiny numbers that are found next to the elemental symbols in a formula. And here's step number 3, add all the masses together, and we'll add one thing. So add all the masses together, and add units. So what will the units be? They're called grams per mole. Okay, it's a fraction, and in a shortened way, we can just write G divided by MOL. So you'll see everything I calculate, every mole of a substance that I calculate the mass for will have G divided by MOL. behind it. So again, this would be a great time to pause the video to write this down. And just for the sake of the length of this video, we're going to keep moving here. So I have 3 examples to go over, okay? So here are some symbols. I have an element, I have another element, and then over here I have a compound. And they want to know the mass of 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles of each of these, okay? And again, that sounds kind of hard, but it's not. All we have to do is follow our steps and look at a periodic table. Okay, so we have oxygen as our first example. If I pull up a periodic table, what I have to do is this, click on oxygen and look at the decimal at the bottom here, okay? The decimal is 15.999. That is the mass of 1 mole of the symbol O, okay? So let's go ahead, let's write that down. So notice that there's only a single oxygen. There's nothing to multiply this by, and there's no other elements present. So really, just transferring that number gives us our answer. So the units we have to attach is grams divided by MOL. And we've come up with our first answer. So now let's look at number 2, hydrogen, okay? So what is the mass of a single hydrogen? Well, it's 1.008. How many hydrogens do we have? So what does the subscript tell us to do? Multiply this number by 2. So now you grab your trusty calculator, you do 2 times 1.008. And what that comes up with is 2.016 grams per mole. So 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles of this substance equates to the mass that we've just calculated. So if you feel confident as of this point, please go ahead and pause the video. What I want you to do is try example number 3 on your own. Otherwise, just keep watching, and we're going to get after it as a team here. Okay, so H2SO4 is called sulfuric acid, and I know that just from experience. And what we need to do, again, is utilize all of our steps now, because not only do I have subscripts, but I have other elements. So what's the first thing that I have to do? Well, I have to find the masses of the individual symbols. So H, remember, was 1.008. We figured that out just a second ago. Sulfur, we have not seen that yet, so let's go ahead and click on that one. 32.06. And then how about oxygen? What was oxygen? 15.999. Okay, great. We have our symbols here, okay? Or the masses of our symbols. Now let's follow the subscripts. So I have 2 hydrogen. Multiply that by 2. There's a single sulfur because there is no subscript, so this gets multiplied by 1, you could say. And then how about oxygens? Well, there's 4 oxygens, so we have to multiply this number by 4. So let's go ahead, let's do all those calculations. So 2 times 1.008 gives us 2.016. Okay, 1 times 32.06 gives us just 32.06. And then 4 times 15.999 gives us 63.996. All right, so here's the last step. We've come up with these individual masses. I want the mass of this entire compound, so what I have to do is add this together, okay? So now we're going to add. So let's go ahead, let's do that. So I got my calculator, 2.016 plus 32.06 plus 63.996 gives us 98.072 grams per mole. Let's go ahead, let's put this in writing. What does that number truly tell us? So here's what that number tells us. 1 mole, okay, which is 6.02 times 10 to the 23rd particles. So 1 mole of sulfuric acid has a mass of 98.072 grams. That's what your answer says in full. So just as a conclusion here, if you're comfortable with adding and light multiplication, and you can find numbers off the periodic table, then this skill is pretty much in the bag. And remember, the reason why we went over the quantity of a mole is because when you calculate a molar mass like we just did off a periodic table for an element or a compound, okay, you are calculating the mass of 1 mole of that substance, it's called. And remember, 1 mole is equal to 6.02 times 10 to the 23. So each one of these answers is so this is a mole of oxygen, this is a mole of H2, and then this was 1 mole of sulfuric acid. That concludes our video, and if you have more questions, please go ahead and ask your teacher. But like I said, if you can add and do some multiplication to calculate the 1 mole of a substance, then this skill should be pretty much in the bag for you. Have a great day, and we'll see you at class.